Officials have announced federal charges will not be filed against Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hannah Batab.
And I'm Brittany Pieper. The Department of Justice announced even though charges will not be filed against Wilson, they think there is racial bias in the Ferguson Police Department. The scathing report revealed Ferguson police engaged in a pattern and practice of discrimination against African Americans. The report found 85% of traffic stops and 93% of arrests were of African Americans. Also, the report says when police did use force, 88% of the time the suspect was black. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder says these were the feelings of a community.
This investigation found a community that was deeply polarized, a community where deep distrust and hostility often characterized interactions between police and area residents, a community where local authorities consistently approached law enforcement not as a means for protecting public safety, but as a way to generate revenue, a community where both policing and municipal court practices were found to be disproportionately harmful to African American residents.
Holder advised anyone who's been inspired or wants to be a part of the dialogue that they should read the full report.
This all stems from the event that happened in Ferguson last August. Darren Wilson is the white police officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. The black teen was unarmed when he was killed. Following Brown's death, the Ferguson community and many parts of the country erupted in protests. A statewide emergency was declared in Missouri amid clashes between police and protesters, which went on for weeks.
Those protests led to the destruction of multiple businesses in the Ferguson area. The city of Ferguson is still in the process of rebuilding businesses. Because today's decision to not bring charges against Wilson was expected by most, protests of the same nature are not expected.
Many of the people who are really embedded in the movement ever saw it as a stopping point at any point. Everybody's still very much engaged and maybe not protesting or participating in as much direct action, but are handling things more politically.
A Missouri grand jury cleared Wilson in November. He later resigned from the police department. We'll take a closer look at the report coming up on KOMU 8 News at 6.
Columbia police are looking for suspects targeting elderly women out shopping. So far, CPD says they've received reports of incidents happening at least 3 Columbia stores. The suspects go up to victims, strike up a conversation with them, and then steal the victim's purse while she is distracted. They say even though the suspects have so far targeted elderly women out shopping, everyone should be vigilant.
Be conscientious of your surroundings. This can happen anywhere. It doesn't just happen in businesses. It can happen on the streets, and pickpockets happen everywhere. So pickpockets aren't, going to necessarily just be the creepy person in the corner.
CPD didn't release many details about the suspects, but say they drive a black, newer model Dodger Caravan or Chrysler Town & Country. They ask anyone with information to call CPD or Crime Stoppers at 875-TIPS.
A fallen Mid-Missouri soldier is finally coming home after more than 44 years. The Army declared Rodney Griffin missing in action after his helicopter went down in Cambodia during the Vietnam War. KOMU 8's Katie Moeller joins us with our first local look at how his friends and family are taking the news that his remains have been positively identified.
Rodney Griffin is coming home, but it isn't the way his family and friends hoped for years that he would. I visited Centralia in Mexico today to talk with his sister-in-law and his friends from the Centralia VFW. They told me finding Griffin after all this time has been a bittersweet experience.
This is when he's in a Jeep in Vietnam.
Doris Griffin says she and her family have never given up hope that her brother-in-law, Rodney Griffin, would return from Vietnam.
It's been 45 years, and it's been a long time.
That long wait is over now. Griffin will return, but his homecoming brings mixed emotions.
I'm glad that we found out, because I always wondered what would happen if we'd all passed away and there wasn't anybody down the road.
Steve Gordon was part of the recovery operation that searched for Griffin after his helicopter went down in Cambodia.
Sad. I think it was more sad to me than happy, just because there was always a little hope that he would pop up and be mad at us because we didn't come to get him.
Doris Griffin says even after Rodney was officially declared deceased, she didn't want to believe it.
We never accepted it. We wouldn't. I mean, They made it official, but we didn't accept it.
The town of Centralia certainly hasn't forgotten Rodney Griffin. In addition to naming this street we're on after him, they also have this memorial right here that has the day he went missing in action in 1970. Daryl Reeves, who grew up with Rodney Griffin, says it almost didn't feel real that Rodney was missing for so long.
I always thought he'd just come bouncing through the door someday, you know. Never has happened.
Gordon says Rodney's memory inspires the members of the Centralia VFW even now.
That's why, as a rule, most of us live every day pretty full.
Doris Griffin says that's the way Rodney would have wanted it. Rodney was awarded the Purple Heart for valor in combat, but sometimes an award just isn't enough.
We'd rather have Rodney instead of the medals.
The Centralia VFW is meeting tonight to discuss raising funds in Rodney Griffin's memory to help pay for a funeral when his remains return.
It has been a busy day for legislation on the Hill, from vetoes to Supreme Court opening statements. KOMU 8's Kaylee Peterson has your First Nation report.
The Senate has failed to override the president's veto of the Keystone Pipeline. Senate Republicans fell short by 5 votes. The Keystone project would have delivered oil from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. Supporters say it would provide jobs, while critics say the country should lessen its dependence on fossil fuels. The Supreme Court heard opening statements in the third case to challenge the Affordable Care Act. King versus Burwell argues that Congress authorized subsidies only for people in states that set up healthcare exchanges. One of the plaintiffs says it is about options.
We want Americans to have options. We believe there is a better way to take care of people who need help. But there is no reason to force millions of us to pay tax penalties if we don't join a government program.
If the court rules with the plaintiffs, more than 5 million people could lose subsidies that help them pay for insurance. The world's biggest restaurant chain announced a major change to the way they will buy food. McDonald's says its restaurants in the U.S. will gradually stop selling chicken that was raised using human antibiotics over the next 2 years. This is the biggest step a food company has taken to change the way chicken producers function. McDonald's will still buy from farmers who responsibly use antibiotics, not in human medical treatment. And that's your first look around the nation.
Mexican authorities arrested a major player in the drug cartel. Omar Trevino Morales was caught during an early morning raid. He is considered the most important leader of the Zetas. That's an organization blamed for killing more than 100,000 people. Both the U.S. and Mexican governments had offered millions of dollars in reward money. A European human rights organization says French laws are not clear enough in banning spanking. French officials say they won't do anything about the laws, though. France is home to an ongoing cultural debate where spanking is considered a traditional form of discipline.
Just because March is here doesn't mean spring weather is here yet. Let's send it over to Kenton for a check of the forecast.
Yeah, it'll be a few more weeks until we're officially at springtime. However, we're going to start to look a little bit more like it as we head into the next few days. First, though, it has been a cold one for us. Looking back even yesterday evening, we were still in the 30s. Then, of course, we cooled down below that 32-degree freezing mark. Saw a little bit of a light dusting of snow move through mid-Missouri, a little bit more down south. And then we got into the upper teens for low temperatures. Now we're in the middle teens all across mid-Missouri, and it's been a bit breezy as well. Saw gusts up to about 25 to 30 miles an hour early this morning, then just about 10 to 15 all day long. And of course, right when those winds spiked up, our wind chill temperatures went way down, feeling like single digits most of our morning and only teens this afternoon. Looking at satellite and radar, still a little bit of some flurry action to the south, all the way from Jefferson City down to Rolla and Osage Beach. Not looking like a lot of accumulation, but another dusting possible by 6 a.m. on Thursday, where a winter weather advisory is still in effect from yesterday, actually, for Camden, Miller, and Marys County. All of the latest 8-day forecast coming up for you after the break.
The True Falls Film Festival kicks off tomorrow. Find out what businesses are doing to get ready for the crowds.
And you are taking a live look over the Sedalia area. Still see a bit of snow out there, but it's certainly not as much as we had earlier last week. It's 5:08, and this is KOMU 8 News First at 5, coverage you can count on.